Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with Dara Cam. That is me. Today's special guest is Stacy Ritter, President and CEO of Visit Lauderdale, a former state representative from Broward County. She's going to give us the down low on what's going on with tourism in Broward. Stick with us, you don't want to miss it.
It's not really canceled business because they didn't actually book, but we were close to booking.
I see.
And they decided to go elsewhere. Some of them won't come to Florida at all until things start to change.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State, Florida.
We're going to take a deep dive into what's going on with tourism in South Florida. Thank you so much for joining us, Stacy.
It is my pleasure, Dara. Thank you for the invitation.
Stacy Ritter didn't know, but she didn't remember me, but I remembered her because from the Wayback Machine, I was reporting for the Palm Beach Post when Stacy Ritter was a state rep from Broward County.
That's right, which is why we didn't really interact much because you were too busy covering the Palm Beach legislators, I'm sure.
Yeah, we had a lot going on back in the day. Back in the day, it was a very different landscape in the counties and in the newspaper. It was a newspaper at that time.
Right, that's right.
So let's start. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start by talking a little bit about Visit Lauderdale. It says Lauderdale. I think it used to be known as the Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thank you very much for rebranding. But you also do tourism tell me what your agency does.
So we are the destination management organization for Broward County. I work for Broward County. Basically, we are Broward County's tourism agency. So we changed the name to Visit Lauderdale because it's easier on the tongue for people to just roll off. And all of our social media handles were at Visit Lauderdale. And Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau is a mouthful. So we did a whole bunch of focus grouping and talked to people about what they recognized, names they recognized about the destination. And Lauderdale was the preeminent name that was recognized. Mm-hmm. And so while our job is to promote and market to for all of Broward's 31 cities, Fort Lauderdale is the most recognizable, and thought it would just make it easier for people to know where we were.
Yeah, I grew up in Hollywood, and even now I still say it's between Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and it's in Broward County for listeners who don't know.
Which is between Palm Beach and Miami-Dade.
Right. Well, that's true. It is between Palm Beach and Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale. I miss it down there, I got to tell you. Jealous. So let's jump right in. I was reading in the Sunset, and I felt like I was pressing it because I booked this episode with you a couple days ago, and today I saw a story, a couple stories about tourism from the Sun Sentinel. One story was headlined, "Broward says losses mount for tourism as more conventions stay away, citing fear for safety of diverse groups." Can you tell us a little bit about what's been canceled and why, what people have told you about why they're canceling?
We have experienced since the middle of May 14 conferences which have chosen not to come to Broward County, and all cite political reasons, whether it's women's reproductive freedom or African American history, education in general, LGBTQ plus issues, don't say gay, anti-woke laws that were passed, gun laws that have been weaker, looser gun laws which have been passed in the past legislative session, all as a reason why they're not coming to the state of Florida in general and us specifically. And it's not really canceled business because they didn't actually book, but we were close to booking.
I see.
And they decided to go elsewhere. Some of them won't come to Florida at all until things start to change.
Is this avoidance, we'll call it avoidance instead of cancellation, they're taking their business elsewhere. Is that localized down in Broward County, or is that going on all around the state? Do you know?
It's going on all around the state, but Visit Lauderdale has been particularly transparent about it. We don't think that's an issue. It's an issue that should be swept under the rug. We think that the economic impact to people across the state who are either in tourism or specifically or indirectly related to tourism, or just residents of the state which rely on tourists to come here, we think it's an important issue to talk about. You mentioned earlier I was in the State House of Representatives. We often pass laws that had consequences we did not foresee. And it was very important for those consequences to be brought to elected officials' attention so they could fix them. We think that this is an important issue to be brought to our elected officials' attention so that they can maybe work on fixing it so we don't have this issue going forward. I know Orlando has lost business. Miami-Dade has lost business. Do I think they're being 100% truthful? I do not. Again, I don't know why. It is much better to talk about these issues, get them out in the open, explain to people how these laws have impacted something they probably never expected it to impact, but it is having that effect. And when tourism is your number one industry, anything that you do that can negatively impact tourism should be something that we talk about.
I mean, you're a former legislator. What do you think are the chances? The Republicans have a supermajority in the House and the Senate. Governor DeSantis I've been doing this for a hot minute, and he is one of the strongest governors. I am not sure how to phrase this in a way that doesn't sound pejorative. A governor that has a very strong grasp on power over the legislature. That's putting it mildly. So do you really anticipate that there will be any backing down from these policies the state's adopted?
I don't know the legislature well enough. Specifically, I just don't follow it as I used to. I probably don't know 80% of who's in the state house or who's in the state senate. But I do know that regardless of that, it is important to educate and inform them on issues of which they may not know as much as they should. And I remember, state representatives and state senators are part-time. Everybody else has a real job where they can earn a real living. You can't always spend as much time on every specific issue. You're dealing with 1,000 issues during any legislative session. You rely on the experts to come talk to you about what you're doing. Nobody talked to the tourist community about this before. I don't think anybody expected it to have an impact like it has. So now that we know it is having an impact, and it is having an impact across the state, it's time to have that conversation. So at the very least, let's have a rational, reasonable conversation with policymakers in Tallahassee about what they've done and how it has impacted an area that they may not have anticipated it. That's the first step. Whatever happens after that is on them. I can't say, I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I'd be living in, the south of France somewhere, living the life, sipping pina coladas, but I don't. But I do know that at the very least, let's have a conversation. Let's start that conversation with policymakers. Let them know. They may not care at the end of the day, but at least we have done our job as tourism experts to tell them what's been happening.
Do you have an estimated dollar amount for the, lost business that wasn't finalized? I think I saw the number 14 million, something like that.
Well, now, what are we, mid-August?
Yes.
End of August now, it's up to an $80 million economic impact.
So that's including not just the bookings, but that's the economic impact of what those bookings would have brought?
Correct. So that's not just hotel revenue loss. That every visitor, there's an industry standard calculator that tells us on average what a visitor spends during a day. So that's that multiplied by the number of people and other factors as well. But it is an industry standard that is used across the country. We're not making these numbers up. We plug them into a calculator. They get spit out with what the economic impact is. And sadly, the problem is, obviously there's a lot of problems here, but the biggest problem is, or maybe it's not the biggest, but it's certainly one of the biggest, jobs are at stake.
Right.
We saw in 2020 what happens when visitors don't come to Florida. Tens of thousands of people lose their jobs. They cannot feed their families. They cannot pay their bills. When tourists don't come, that's what happens when your number one economy is tourism. That's our biggest concern. And I do say that not lightly. Our biggest concern is people losing their jobs because business lost, visitors don't come, hotels don't need as many people, restaurants don't need as many people, retail doesn't need as many people. And then you've got a whole bunch of people who don't have work and don't have the respect and dignity that work gives us on an everyday basis.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that state tourism leaders are saying that the reason there's not the kind of numbers that you might expect to see is because everybody, Florida was booming post-COVID because we opened early and everybody else was shut. Now everybody's open. And so, people are going elsewhere. But you're saying the reasons that they're giving specifically in Broward is because of these policies, the culture war issues.
There are there are several different lines of business in tourism. There's the leisure side, and when Visit Florida gives you numbers about Q1 being the best quarter we've ever had, for us it was as well. Calendar quarter one of 23 was an amazing year, blew the doors off of even 22, which was a record year at that point. But that's mostly leisure business, and that was also before the legislative session of 2023 was over. But on the group side, which is business that gets booked years in advance.
Right.
So we won't see the economic impact of this for years to come. It's not immediate like leisure. You might decide to go away next weekend, spur of the moment. You might, plan a trip 6 months from now, a major trip, let's say to Europe. That's leisure business. The group business books, we're booking 31 through 35 right now.
Wow.
With group business. And so you won't see that. So it's very easy to say everything's great. Look at how great the numbers are. Yes, that's true. But let's take a pause and let's wait to see what happens in 26 and 27 and beyond.
I saw another story that thank you for that explanation, because I think that's important and that context gets lost a lot of times in discussions about the tourism numbers. I want to ask you about the float and the Rose Parade. That's another story I saw in the Sun Sentinel this morning.
Well, yesterday, and I want to thank my boss, the county administrator, Monica Sapero, for blessing this. But the Broward County Board of County Commissioners unanimously approved having her sign contracts to let us put a first ever Visit Lauderdale float in the Tournament of Roses Parade on January 1st of 2024. And we're really excited about it. I have to say, I've watched the Rose Parade since, 60 years, however long.
Same, yeah.
I plopped my kids in front of the TV, just like my mom plopped me in front of the TV, and we just watched it. It was the most beautiful parade. And in January 1st of 2020, my husband and I actually flew out there and we saw it in person because it was a bucket list thing for me. And thought, okay, well, I've done it, check that off. And then this January, 2023, I was watching the Rose Parade, as I do every year, and the Visit Louisiana float went by, and it was a riverboat. And I looked at it and I thought, we should do a float in the Rose Parade. Why don't we ever do a float in the Rose Parade? And here we are. So once the contracts get signed, and that's takes some time when you're government, like everything takes time when you're government, we're going to start designing a float and put it in the Rose Parade on January 1st, 2024. And we're going to feature, we're going to focus on the warm and welcoming vibe you get when you come to visit Lauderdale to vacation.
So what would that be? Beaches?
Yeah, beach, 75% of our visitors come for the beach. So, but I grew up here, so I can say that this is just, I guess when you live here, you don't even really see what you've got going on around. But Everglades is huge for visitors.
Right.
People who aren't from here get such a kick out of seeing an alligator in natural habitat, which, okay, I used to have one in my backyard when I lived in Parkland.
Right.
And, it's just, but they love that. So focusing on what Florida's original natural environment, making sure that we dip our hat to our indigenous people. We have a Seminole tribe here. They actually have the only guitar hotel in the entire world, not far from
Yes.
where I'm recording
Shout
this.
out to the Seminole tribe of Florida there.
We have Butterfly World, which is the largest butterfly, I don't know what you would call it, sanctuary.
Yes, it is a butterfly sanctuary. Yeah, it's really cool. Very hot there, but it's really cool.
But when I think about the visual aspect of this, butterflies are certainly a beautiful part, and everything is an organic material out in the Tournament of Roses parade. So I'd like to weave in materials that come from here, that come specifically from Broward County to put on the float. And we are sponsors of the entertainment float, which means we get 2.5 minutes on air, just focusing on us. The float stops where the grandstands are. We get 2.5 minutes with an entertainer, and the announcers will say the things we want them to say for that period of time. And the return on investment is like 720%. So
wow.
And of course, it's not general revenue, it's tourist development tax dollars, it's the bed tax. So no residents are paying for this.
It's about $800,000, I think you're mentioning for that.
It's about $800,000, and the ROI exceeds $5 million. It's on multiple networks. Of course, will be downloaded and watched online.
Sure.
And there's lots of social media. And we're gonna do a documentary, sort of like, I want to the road to the roses, but
right.
That's what we're gonna call it. But we started yesterday filming when I did the county commission meeting to document this, because it's probably the only time we'll do it. It's a big expense, and having a Florida destination in a California parade, we think is an important message to send, that we are everyone under the sun, and we mean it when we say it.
Yeah.
Broward County has 2 million people in it. We are a majority minority county. There are 170 nations represented by Broward's residents speaking 147 languages. You cannot get any more diverse than we are in Broward County. I read a statistic recently that said we are more diverse than the island of Manhattan.
Really?
Yep. And we're going to celebrate that. And we do celebrate it
Before
every day.
Before you go on, when you and I had a brief chat yesterday, and you told me about Broward being a majority minority county, and that was surprising to me. I mean, I've lived in Florida practically my whole life. I grew up in Broward, and I didn't realize that. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of diversity that you have in Broward?
Sure. In very general terms, about a third of the population is Hispanic, about a third identifies as either African or Caribbean American, and about a third is Caucasian. So, and of course, you've got other nations represented. So I say it's a vast generalization, but
right.
So we are a majority minority county. And when I moved to Broward County 50 years ago, it was completely different. Very white, very straight, very conservative, a very male centric. We've done a 180, and we celebrate that. We don't want to go back. We don't want to go back to the way it was in 1965. We want it to be 2023 and look forward and continue to celebrate the differences, because what we've done in Broward County as a result of this, and there's a large immigrant population here, which have moved here for a better life. I mean, they didn't just decide, let's pick up my life and move 1,000 miles away, 5,000 miles away, whatever, just for the hell of it. They come here to live the American dream, and we want to celebrate that, and we want to make sure that they get to live out that American dream, that the opportunities that they have are endless, and that their children will have better lives than they did, just as I want my children and grandchildren to have a better life than I did. And we celebrate that. And when you do celebrate that, you weave an incredibly beautiful tapestry full of multiculturalism that enhances and enriches people's lives, and we're going to continue to do it.
Hang tight. We'll be right back with President and CEO of Visit Lauderdale, Stacy Ritter.
Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Welcome back. to a deeper dive with Dara. You know, one of the things that I saw in the Sun Sentinel story about the Rose Parade float was that you might have drag performers on there. Broward has a large LGBTQ community, and there's been a lot of pushback against some of the policies that the legislature and the DeSantis administration have taken, targeting gender affirming care for trans children and adults, and also banning children from attending drag shows. So I was asking if the float, are we going to have drag performers on there? Do we know?
Well, I don't know yet because the contracts aren't signed.
And let's not make it about that, right? You know what I mean?
That's obviously what, the newspapers want to make it about, because that's clickbait for them. And,
right.
And while we have no problem with drag performers here, and generally speaking, and certainly Visit Lauderdale has none, it's too early to tell what we're going to put on it, but there will be LGBTQ plus representation. There will be multicultural representation. There will be Seminole representation. We have Indigenous people here that we want to celebrate. We want to make sure that story does not overwhelm the natural assets we have here that we sell. I mean, this is the reason we're spending this money is to promote and market for tourists, to bring people here, and we want to make sure that that's the story. So we'll feature beaches, and we'll feature other beautiful aspects of what we do, as I said, but we want the people on the float to reflect the diversity of the community.
Yeah, I think that's really neat, the Rose Parade. And I also find it fascinating in a way because Governor DeSantis and Governor Gavin Newsom have been taking shots at each other. I mean, there's been talk of a debate between the two of them, which I had Nikki Fried on the podcast a couple weeks ago. She's the chair of the Florida Democratic Party, and she told me when I was asking her about that, yay or nay, she said, not in a million years. It's not going to happen in a million years. So I kind of agree with her, but it's interesting that you want to elevate Florida in a state that is where there's so much combativeness going on between the leaders of the two states.
And politics tourism should and always has transcended politics. People travel places they want to go to, and don't rarely think about the leaders. I mean, we've all traveled to places where we may not necessarily agree with the political situation in that country, but it doesn't stop us from seeing the things that we want to see. That's how it's always been. This is not a political statement we're making, but it is a statement that says, don't paint all Floridians with the same brush. We're not a monolithic group. We're not the Borg. There's not groupthink here. 20 million people live here. Don't expect 20 million of us to be what you think Florida is. We think we want to make the statement. We're a Florida destination. We're going to a blue state, California, to show everybody across the world, because this is an international event. People watch the Rose Parade, not just from the US, but around the world. We want to show people that we are a warm and welcoming community. We want you to come here and have a great experience. We say everyone under the sun is our tagline. We rebranded 2 years ago to everyone under the sun. We decided we were going to double down on that message, because when we say everyone under the sun, we mean it. Come here. Don't care how you identify. Don't care how you worship. If you worship, don't care what actually, we do care. I guess that's the point.
Right.
We really do care.
Right.
We care that you feel comfortable here. You feel safe here. You feel free to be whoever you are, however you identify. Liberal, conservative, black, white, brown, gay, straight, non-binary, whatever it is, trans. We just want you to be yourself and experience the beauty of the destination. And we want that to be the message when we go to California and present our float in the Rose Parade.
That's really fascinating. I am wondering what you do projections. What's the outlook for you regionally? Do you see this turning around, or do you see what's your projections?
Oh gosh, again, crystal ball. Don't have one. But Florida's been trending this way for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're in it for a little while longer.
Mm.
But like every pendulum, it swings one way and then it swings the other. And I would ask people who are listening to this to not give up on Florida. Those of us who live here, who embrace human rights as universal and believe people should be respected no matter how they identify, we're still here. And there are millions of us who are here who are going to stay here and fight that fight. I'm not giving up my state. I've been here longer than many of the people who are making these policy decisions. I'm not giving up on my state. I love where I live, and I love the people who live here. And that's really what I think Florida has been and still is in most places in this state. And we're going to continue to let people know that.
I just wanted to do a little bit of, well, thank you very much for that. I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about what tourism development councils are, what some of the projects that they fund, some of, one project that is going to be funded is this float, right? The participation in the parade. I'm sure it's more than just the float. It's the airtime and whatnot.
And there's 2 days of activations afterward. There's events leading up to it. So it's, as I said, there's a 720% return on investment.
Yeah, it's a thing. So just tourism development councils, what are they? How do they get their money? And can you tell me about any of the projects that they've funded?
TDCs are Tourist Development Council. TDCs are different across the state depending on whether you're a government agency like we are or a 501c6 private-public partnership. For us, our TDC is an advisory board that is populated by people who are put on by the Broward County Board of County Commissioners. Each county commissioner gets 1 appointment. That's 9. And then there are 2 more that are sort of whatever, but they're all appointed by the county commission at the end of the day. And for us, they're just an advisory board. In other cases, they are the actual board of directors where they direct where the CVBs, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, go and how they spend their money. My boss is the county administrator. I report only to her. She reports to the 9 county commissioners. The money comes from the bed tax. We are not general revenue funded. We don't take property taxes. Our money does not take away from libraries or public works or transportation or the myriad of other services that county government provides. So when you go to a hotel, there's a tax. There's a sales tax, and then there's something called the bed tax. For us in Broward at 6% per night, that money goes into a big fund. We get about 25 to 30% of it for operations and for staff. And what we do with that money, there's a statute. There's a state statute that dictates how we can spend the money. The money the primary purpose must be for the promotion and marketing of the destination to tourists. So we can't spend money within the county. Visitors are considered people who come in from outside the county, but they can be day trippers. They don't have to stay in a hotel. And that money is used for, we fund music festivals, we fund sporting events, volleyball and soccer and cricket.
Cricket
Broward County has the only certified cricket stadium in the country.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What was that?
Broward County has the only certified cricket stadium in the country.
Wow.
So cricket is huge here, and we fund conferences to come. So we either provide support at the convention center or through other whatever other receptions or room nights. We also travel the world. Our leisure department travels the world, talking to tour operators and travel agents, because yes, people still use tour operators and travel agents, especially in Europe or South and Latin America. And we go out and market and promote the destination to the world. We are an international destination. And I've got people who are on the road 250 days a year.
Wow.
Their job is to talk about this place and then, of course, we have a marketing department which spends money to market, whether it's online or a lot of our money goes to digital, social, things like a Times Square billboard, and some traditional magazines, depending on where the placement is. I have a multicultural department. Nikki's job is to bring in multicultural events and multicultural conferences to the destination. We were the first CVB to have an LGBTQ plus dedicated department. We still do, although we have expanded it now to accessibility, because we've realized as we all evolve, which is hopefully what we all are doing as we get older and learn more, is that people with accessibility issues were long ignored in travel.
Oh my goodness. I think I told you that I fractured my tibia in January, and I was home in a wheelchair on no weight bearing for 3 months, and I had quite the learning experience, and I don't want to equate my brief experience with that of anyone who lives with a disability and mobility issue, but I can tell you that I was just amazed at how restricted my access was to even the most basic places, and how much I needed the help of other people. I mean, it was just, I was shocking to me. It was very eye-opening.
I broke my shoulder last October, my right arm, and I'm right-handed. So there you go. So
welcome to the show.
So I was in a sling for 8 weeks. And again, I also would not equate it to someone who has a permanent disability.
Yes.
But simple things that we don't even think about came to light for me, and it opened my eyes as well to people who every day
yes
have to experience what I experienced for a very brief period of time. And because the accessible traveler has been long ignored, and yet they love to travel just like everyone else does and spend money just like everyone else does, we've made a concerted effort to pay attention to that and encourage them to visit us, because we are an accessible destination. We have, ramps on the beach. We've got beach wheelchairs. Obviously, the hotels are all ADA compliant, and other things as well. And so we've expanded inclusivity to also include accessibility.
That's fantastic. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. There's one before we go. I heard somebody speaking in the background, and I was told by a little birdie that you have a hobby.
Well, shopping?
No, dog rescue?
I have 3 right now. I have 3. We just adopted what was number 6 of our Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. There are currently 3 surviving. I am a rescue mom. I only rescue. I believe in adopting, not shopping, because as I've adopted these dogs, of the 6, 4 were breeders in horrible circumstances, living in cages, going from one cage to the next, never having a kind word or a soft hand or a soft bed or touching grass. And so 4 of them, when they retired, we adopted them. And so now we have 3. Poppy came to us in June. She joins her brothers Fraser and Augie. And I got a brood. And plus, my first grandchild was born 2 weeks ago.
Well,
so an ever-expanding family.
Yeah. Well, mazel tov. That sounds like a lot of, you've got a lot of mitzvahs there.
You know what? I wasn't going to be that Jewish grandma. Because during the pregnancy, I was like, okay, she's pregnant, fine. Everybody gets pregnant. It's like, okay, this is my daughter-in-law and my son. And then this baby's born 2 weeks ago. And oh my God, now I get it.
Yeah.
Every day I'm not going to go every day because I'm the mother-in-law, so be really careful and not step on their toes. But when can I see the baby? And
you'll be bringing over brisket on every Wednesday.
They don't eat meat.
They don't eat meat. Okay.
Of course not.
Veggie brisket.
So I said to my son, I'm taking her to McDonald's. There's a day when she will be going to McDonald's. We just won't tell you.
That's hilarious.
Someone said to me earlier today that grandparents and children and grandchildren have common enemies. The parents.
That's right. That's right. United front against the parents. Well, listen, thank you so much, Stacy Ritter, President and CEO of Visit Lauderdale, for dropping into Deeper Dive. And I can't wait to have you back to post Rose Parade to talk about your success there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs LLC and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.